Deming's 14 points for management. Point 1. Create constancy of purpose toward improvement of product and service, with the aim to become competitive and to stay in business, and to provide jobs. Purpose is an intent, a goal, a vision of some future desired state.
Constancy of purpose is something that we don't tend to think about. We go and we do, but we don't know why we're doing it, and we don't have a direction on where we're going. And so with constancy of purpose, we understand for ourselves and for others, we communicate that on where we're going. It starts with an aim, and we use that aim to govern the direction that we go, the decisions that we make, and the tasks that we take. We'll refine the aim constantly. So if we think about the system, and our organization is inside a larger system, which is our world, things are changing around us. It could be market conditions can change. Anything around us, policies, politics change, and that may adjust our purpose. I think most businesses tend to think about making money and a profit as their purpose, but it's much deeper than that. When you have constancy of purpose, it means it's always the thought of why are we doing this and where are we going? And so we're constantly thinking about what is the purpose, what is the aim, and are we governing our actions and our decisions by our purpose?
Consider the following questions. Is the aim, the purpose of our organization clear to all? Do we make the purpose obvious by using the stated purpose to govern our decisions every day? Do our workers agree with the purpose? Have we asked? Is our aim much more than just making a profit? Do we understand why Deming thought making a profit was not enough? What Deming management methods are we using to assure we achieve constancy of purpose to stay in business? Do any of the policies and methods used in managing the organization violate Deming's teachings? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 2. Adopt the new philosophy. We are in a new economic age. Western management must awaken to the challenge, must learn their responsibilities, and take on leadership for change.
Adopt the new philosophy. To me, it's two things. The first thing is having the strategy and quality, and the second thing is get away from the diseases of management. So the first one is strategy and quality is about the Deming chain reaction model, which means that you start by improving quality, but it's not only improving quality, it's more of commitment to quality. So that commitment to quality is going to drive other improvements at the lower levels. And those other improvements are going to drive the cost down. You're going to have less mistakes and less errors, and then that will drive productivity up because your costs have gone down and now your productivity is up. That will drive your business to improve, prosper, and then being able to provide more jobs as you grow. So leadership for change is about the traditional or prevailing style of management that basically business schools produce. So the prevailing style of management teaches many things, but the worst of it are what Deming called the deadly diseases of management. So they teach relying on visible management by visible figure only. And they also teach to manage by numbers and objectives and results. They also ask managers to evaluate their employees' performance. It's called the merit appraisal of their employees, and that is going to encourage competition between them. They will be demotivated to do the job when they don't get the results that they want, and they don't win. So it's more like a win-lose kind of situations because some people do well, others don't. So that is the change that Deming is trying to ask managers to abandon those diseases and move to the new style of management.
Consider the following questions. Is productivity harmed by traditional styles of management that can have unintended consequences? like employee turnover. Are continual improvement methods a part of every job, or has it been delegated to a quality department? Do change initiatives rely on external motivators, like incentives or command and control dictates? Are workers encouraged to provide input and test changes as part of a team? Would you spend an hour investigating Dr. Deming's teachings on a new philosophy of management? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 3. Cease dependence on inspection to achieve quality. Eliminate the need for inspection on a mass basis by building quality into the product in the first place.
When Deming was talking about ceasing inspection, he wasn't saying that there are no longer inspectors. He was saying cease dependence on inspection. And that means that you really want to bring the opportunities to identify your quality indicators upstream in the process. You want to bring them into the process so that they're included and they understand what the key to quality indicators are. You don't want a separate group of inspectors inspecting products at the very end of the process, because once you identify that, all of it is waste, and you want to minimize that waste as much as possible, which is why we bring it upstream, so that we can identify any sort of defects before we sink more money into creating products that are defective. There's this example they talk about where someone was scraping their toast. I take the toast out, it's burnt, I scraped it off, and now I have perfect toast. I think how that relates to ceasing dependence on inspection is if you're creating defective products and you notice that they're defective, when you're doing that rework, that's all waste. So that's the scraping off of the toast, is this reworking of defective product. I work in the antenna world, and when we find a defective antenna after the whole thing's been assembled, that's thousands of dollars down the drain. So if we can identify which part is defective as far upstream as possible, we're saving tons of money.
Look around your organization and ask yourself these questions. Where are we burning toast and then being forced to scrape it in services and products? What traditional management beliefs, policies, and actions cause us to burn toast? Are we intentionally building quality into our processes so we can cease dependence on inspection and micromanaging? Are we identifying the potential for defects upstream so we can eliminate poor service delivery, products, waste, and rework? Are we using Deming's management teachings to drive down costs, even as we increase productivity? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 4. End the practice of doing business on the basis of price tag. Minimize instead total cost. Move toward a single supplier for any one item and build a long-term relationship of loyalty and trust.
If your focus is just on reducing costs, you're not thinking about maybe there's a different way to approach this. Procurement officers are usually incentivized or directed to look at price, not total cost. What the procurement officers have not been taught is that the downstream costs can be enormous if the upstream item that they're buying is defective in some way or doesn't fit with the rest of the system. Deming showed that just having detailed specifications for vendors is not a substitute for point 4. Detailed specifications will not minimize total cost. To minimize total cost, it helps to understand that the lower price may result in higher total costs later. Let me give you a couple examples. If your low-price vendor doesn't deliver on time, you pay for that because your process is disrupted, and that's a cost. If the low-price service or product is deficient in some way, you pay for it with dissatisfied customers, and that's lots of costs. Deming said, build a long-term relationship of loyalty and trust. To do that, your vendors must also trust you. That means your aim with vendors needs to include assuring their success, not just your own. To do that, make them a part of your system and treat them as valued partners. Work with them to figure things out and continually improve. That builds trust and drives down their costs and yours. So that's a combination of seeing that system and how those pieces and parts interact. Optimizing the system is we get the best results overall.
Explore the following questions. What costs might we find that result from making procurements based on price tag alone? For example, slower work, stopped work or rework, more need for inspections, or more labor time needed, such as by customer service reps, to resolve mistakes or quality issues. How might we work with vendors to increase our competitiveness and theirs? Look beyond costs to the causes of costs. For example, costs due to inefficiencies in communications between you and vendors. Ask vendors, what information do you need to be more responsive? Ask ourselves, what can we do to make our vendors more successful? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 5. Improve constantly and forever the system of production and service to improve quality and productivity and thus constantly decrease costs.
To improve a system, you need to be able to see the system end to end. There's no way to improve a system if you can't really see the system that you're trying to manage. So step one is find a way to be able to understand that system, know who the right people are so that you can even know what it is you're trying to work on. What's the goal? What's the aim? What is that system doing? What is it you're trying to accomplish? So that's the step number one. Step number two is once you understand the players, once you understand the system that you're working with, you've got to get some data. You've got to understand variability. Is it common cause that's coming through it? We had a lot of customer complaints, lots of customer complaints. Probably 30% of our customers were complaining. And we didn't know, is it just the representatives who are on the floor working with them? Are they the ones with the problem? Is it a system problem? We suspected it was a little of everything. And so we just started, I think continual improvement is just don't be satisfied. We weren't satisfied with that. So we went out, we found problem A, and we worked and solved problem A, and that maybe had a 2% improvement. Then we went after problem B. Most of the transition happened when it left my little team, and I was given a much broader span. I can now look at the whole system. I now had the visibility to the whole system end to end. That was when the breakthroughs really started happening. We drove something that was 30% of our customer base complaining to less than 0.0005 complaints per customer. We completely turned it around. So we solved the process problems. We eliminated the complaints. We changed the process. The process was now capable of delivering almost no complaints. It was completely unprecedented. And I give all of the credit to the Deming methods.
Consider the following questions. Do we use Deming's methods to see the system so it can be understood? Is the data we collect and use the right data? Do we not focus on continual improvement because we're constantly using our resources just to fight fires? Are we hampering people's ability to solve problems because they have visibility only to departmental silos rather than to the whole system? Do we know how to use Deming's teachings to make processes capable of delivering higher quality at lower costs? Do we know which Deming methods to use and how to use them? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 6. Institute training on the job.
Instituting training on the job is also one of the aspects from a traditional organization that we tend to put on the back burner. So we may say that we value it as owners or as management, but when we come down to the priorities, it's all the way in the back. And so when things are going well and when everything's perfect, we'll have some training programs, but when things get a little bumpy, we drop those. However, if we were to instill that and make that the top priority, it's a leading indicator to our workforce. So meaning that if we train on the job and our workforce has a consistent way of understanding how to do their work, then we will have less variation within our outcomes. We will have higher retention. We will have more joy in work. The worst thing that can happen is onboarding new employees and not really having a clear orientation. And they've spent a week, 2, sometimes even months, where they don't even really know what their job is. And they haven't really been introduced to the work staff or to the workforce in any way. And they feel like an outsider even after months being in the job. It is helpful to understand part are you within the whole. And so that's where the systems workflows tend to come into play. And then you have constancy of purpose. So what is our aim? What is the purpose of the organization? And how are you a part of that outcome? So you may be one little piece down here, but you are a sum of all the parts to get that outcome. And that's really important for the worker.
Think about the following questions related to training at your organization. Does everyone understand what their job is, how to do it well, why it's important to the organization, and how it fits into a larger process, both upstream and downstream? Do jobs include roles and responsibilities beyond just the functional work itself, such as supporting the success of others? Are workers engaged in improvement teams so they continually learn and support the organization's aim? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 7. Institute leadership. The aim of supervisors should be to help people and machines and gadgets to do a better job. Leadership of supervisors is in need of overhaul, as well as supervision of production workers.
The job of management is not supervision, but leadership. A leader is someone who provides a humble service to help others be successful in the organization. And that's really what business is about, is we come together as a group of people to provide something that we couldn't provide to society by ourselves. We help others to succeed. That means removing barriers in the workplace that would keep someone from having the knowledge, the tools. A lot of people in supervision think that it's their job to tell people what to do, instead of reversing that and helping people do what they need to do in the organization to meet the aim of the organization. Some people think that management is fighting fires all the time, although that type of approach, you really could say that they're arsonists, because they're not using systems thinking to approach solving a problem. They're just thinking about putting out the fire, instead of thinking about how did that fire start in the first place, and more importantly, did I help start that fire? Leaders need to understand that leadership is not just about managing people, it's also about managing the system and designing the system. And understanding that in any system that you create, there's going to be variability or variation. And the goal is to minimize variation around a customer-defined target and in the absence of defects.
To consider leadership more fully, ask yourself the following questions. Are our supervisors sheriffs, or are they coaches and mentors? Do our supervisors know that about 94% of results come from the system and not from individual people? Or are they still blaming people 94% of the time? Do our supervisors just fight fires? Or have they learned how to prevent fires by working with teams that use Deming's methods to improve processes and systems? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 8. Drive out fear so that everyone may work effectively for the company.
Fear is prevalent everywhere. And unfortunately, we have been taught that we are the authority. And so accountability is a big word in business, regardless if you're in a factory or any type of industry. Authority and accountability are big words. And so when you're a leader or you're in management, that's what you're taught. And so to hold somebody accountable is to hold their feet to the fire. And we talked about quotas. You might have a quota that you have to hold to. And none of those really work towards the joy of the worker. And so a lot of people have fear. So I will talk with owners who will say that my executive team isn't doing what they need to be doing, and they need to be held accountable. But when I will talk to them, they will give me some of the fear concepts. Well, you know, he doesn't tell us this, he doesn't tell us that, he's got different views on this, so why don't you talk to him? Oh, he won't listen. And so there's a lot of fear that lives within, even at the high levels of the organization, the executive suite. It doesn't just live down at the worker level. And so what that does is that gums up the whole system, and it reduces, it's a drag on your productivity and your efficiency. And so if we think about the system again and the output of the system, you are not attaining the true value of your system and the true output of your system. You get rid of fear by being open in how you communicate. Leaders can be a little more vulnerable about saying, I don't know what the answer is, but let's work on it together. And that goes against a lot of what we're taught as managers, as leaders, is I should know the answer. And if I don't know the answer, I should impose what the answer will be. And that holds accountability and that holds authority. But it's the opposite of that. So it's okay to have smarter people in the room than yourself, including your working staff. And you go to them and you say, I don't know what the answer is, but this is what I'm seeing. And how could we solve this problem? How could we make it more efficient? So we can remove that competition, remove the silos, and have people working on the work together. And when we work on the work together, that creates joy for the workers. Everybody loves solving problems and seeing that the problems that they're solving actually has some kind of outcome, positive outcome, and that drives out fear.
Ask yourself the following questions. Do people feel secure in their jobs? Are people comfortable speaking freely with supervisors and subordinates? Is internal competition encouraged or discouraged? Does leadership consider a little fear good to keep people on their toes? Are workers subject to performance reviews? Have numbers or data been altered to avoid punishment or gain rewards? Is there joy in work at your organization? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 9. Break down barriers between departments. People in research, design, sales, and production must work as a team to foresee problems of production and in use that may be encountered with the product or service.
Breaking down barriers starts with thinking about how the entire system works, who the internal customer is and who internal suppliers are, and understanding your particular role in the company, how that fits. It also starts with understanding the aim of the entire process, not just the aim of sub-processes and processes that are within the own department. That is, what is the aim of the organization? So that we don't sub-optimize the entire aim of the organization just to optimize one silo in the department. And I think a lot of that comes from how we're raised. We're raised in a competitive society where there are winners and there are losers, instead of coming at it from a mindset of how does everybody win, including all stakeholders.
In your organization, what are the barriers that must be broken down for departments to work together? Is competition encouraged between departments or groups? Deming advised against internal competition. Does each individual and department understand who their internal suppliers and customers are and how they serve them? Is the aim of each department clear to all and aligned with the aims of other departments in the organization? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 10. Eliminate slogans, exhortations, and targets for the workforce, asking for 0 defects and new levels of productivity. Such exhortations only create adversarial relationships, as the bulk of the causes of low quality and low productivity belong to the system and thus lie beyond the power of the workforce.
Inspirational words are short-lived. They can put people into a state of receptiveness, but without a plan on how to achieve that, people lose interest. And they've seen that happen over time because the workers, they don't have the control to change processes. So if you really want to improve things, you have to show them and lead them how to make those changes. There's a disillusionment with the idea that management is here to help them, but then not actually following up on that gives the impression that no change is going to be achieved. So sending out inspirational emails implies to workers that they aren't doing their job correctly, but in fact they're just dealing with the system that management's created. And so it's really management's responsibility to address the issues of the process, not the workers, because we haven't given them that autonomy to work on the process and change it. When we understand that systems are the results of inputs and outputs and throughputs, not best hopes and wishes, we understand that those inspirational slogans do nothing to address the process or change the variation within the process.
Ask yourself these questions. How often does your organization push slogans, exhortations, or targets? Has anyone asked how workers feel about these messages? Why do you think most workers respond negatively to them? Do slogans actually improve processes? What effect do you think they have on the quality of what you produce? If workers are considered responsible for the productivity of the system, how would they be allowed to change it? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 11. Eliminate work standards, quotas. Substitute leadership. Eliminate management by objective. Eliminate management by numbers, numerical goals. Substitute leadership.
Deming wrote of the factory floor, but this applies to everything. It's not just factories, it's all businesses. Whether you're in the ice cream business, with an ice cream shop or the hardware store, or you're a technology business. So it fits in every aspect. Numerical quotas tend to be a problem because it sets a bias on where we want to go. And so the system itself may not be able to produce whatever the quota that you have. And so that leads to tampering. It leads to larger, greater variation. And the quotas get unintended consequences. And as managers, we tend to think, or we're taught anyway, that quotas get us what we want or what we need or what we expect, but actually gets us the opposite. And we get more of a mess, and we have less understanding about why things aren't working. And that's really directly related to setting quotas and targets. For workers, they understand that sometimes it's not really possible. They wouldn't say that it doesn't fit within the specifications of the system, as Deming would say, but they understand what's possible and what's not possible. And so if you tell them that they have to do 100 of whatever the calls or producing whatever, they know that it's not possible to do 100. And so what that does is that lowers their motivation. It lowers their understanding of what is possible. They start to block off their brain, and they don't even think about how I can improve the system. They're just robots. And you actually lose leadership value, capital, from your management, from your workers, if you start to tell them to do some quotas or targets that aren't going to fit within the system. Another aspect that happens is maybe you set quota, this doesn't happen very often, but you might set a quota that's below capability, and you get a lot of people just doing part of their work, meaning they'll do 25, but the system could really do 100, and then they're just kind of lounging around and hanging out. And so you lose productivity and efficiency that way. The moral of the story is it's not about the quotas. If you want to get efficiency, whatever you're after as a manager or a leader, you work on the system. And then you create the constancy of purpose, the vision, the aim of where we're going, and you use that as a talking point with your workers, your willing workers. And they will embrace that, and they will produce whatever the system produces. And that's a stable system. And once we have that, then we can measure the output of that and say it's 25. If the average is 25 or the variation is 10 to 30, then we know that that's what the system produces. And if that's not within my specification as the manager and I want to get 50, then what do? We work on the system.
Consider these questions. How did you arrive at your numerical quota or objective? How do you know the system is capable of meeting that objective? What are the negative consequences of assigning quotas? What did Deming mean by substitute leadership? How could management shift from prescribing outcomes, such as quotas, to focusing on the performance of the process? Why did Deming say that targets can distract you from making real improvements? Deming's 14 points for management. Point 12. Remove barriers that rob the hourly worker of his right to pride in workmanship. The responsibility of supervision must be changed from sheer numbers to quality. Remove barriers that rob people in management and in engineering of their right to pride in workmanship. This means abolishment of the annual or merit rating and management by objective.
One of the ways in which management can rob the hourly worker of their right to pride in workmanship is through the annual performance review. And specifically, we look at people as individuals and not part of a bigger system. And how the system is set up is really how that individual can succeed in that system. And also recognizing that it's not just one individual working by themselves, that we all work together. And so if one person is deemed to have success by some measurement system for a performance review, we really don't consider that it's the whole system that helped them to get there, or maybe even things outside of the system. So the goal of that system really should be, if we have someone who needs help in performance, is how do we help that individual be successful in the system, re-examining the system and getting rid of things that put them in an order or a ranking that is harmful to their psychology. So the responsibility of management is to manage the system and to lead with systems thinking. And when we look at an individual, then we're already not considering the system in which they work or the context in which they work, which will either make or break the success of the whole system.
Consider the following questions. Would it be useful to identify barriers to pride and workmanship that exist in your organization? Can you think of examples when quality was sacrificed to achieve quotas or numerical goals? When something goes wrong, is your organization more likely to blame individuals or improve the system? Have you researched the negative effects of performance reviews? Are you aware that performance reviews are overhead and that they steal time away from studying how to improve systems and processes? Deming's 14 Points for Management. Point 13. Institute a vigorous program of education and self-improvement.
I liked one definition of vigorous is that it is powerful in both action or effect. It's not random. It is communicated to employees in clear operational definitions, in guidelines. It is not related to the job. It is related to educating yourself. The training is about the job, and that's another point in the 14 points. But self-improvement is a totally different thing. So it is, the idea is to create or to allow for creativity, which will drive innovation and drive loyalty to the company. This is something that is going to encourage employees to come up with new ideas, test new ideas. So that's a totally different thing, which contributes to the well-being of employees as well. Some companies would say, okay, we're going to send you to a course because it's related to the job. But that's not really what Deming intended. What Deming intended here is self-improvement away from the job. So it could be any course, any program that they want to get in. So he intended for it to be more proactive, to bring that talent and then just develop it even more by giving self-improvement and education. So that's why it's a little different. It's actually different from the training because it has nothing to do with actually doing the job. It creates innovation. It allows employees to innovate, to test new theories that they might have. But they're not going to get that just from training and just being focused on the job itself.
Ask yourself the following. Does your organization consider the value of supporting both on-the-job training and education for self-improvement? What type of support does your organization offer for self-improvement? Are workers able to choose their own form of self-improvement? Why or why not? Can they work with a mentor who might guide them? What competitive advantages might come from encouraging self-improvement? Can you identify examples of how self-improvement may have resulted in better insights or innovation? Deming's 14 Points for Management. Point 14. Put everybody in the company to work to accomplish the transformation. The transformation is everybody's job.
What did Deming mean by the transformation? The transformation really is how do we stay in business and survive in the long term? And I don't think it's something that any one person can do. So when he said we need to put everybody to work at the transformation, that just means that if I'm over in Department A and there's somebody else in Department B, and we're not all on the same page, we're never going to be able to optimize the system end to end. We can't be disappointed in short-term outcomes. It's a long-term vision to get to this aim, approaching things from a systems perspective. We need the organization to be able to see end to end what's happening and be responsible for it. It's not enough to just talk about systems. Document systems with flowcharts and process flows and watch our inputs flow through our throughputs and become outputs. We should do things that will allow us all to be successful. And it might mean I might have to take do something not quite as good for me in order to make it better for everybody else. We all have to be working towards the same goal and the same objective. None of us know enough to do everybody's job. So we have to learn ways to communicate with each other, to work together, to cooperate with each other, to accomplish a common end. And to me, that's what the transformation is all about. When we do that, magic happens. We're able to find problems, solve problems, grow, develop in ways that we never could do on our own. So as we work together, as we cooperate with each other, and we bring about this transformation that Dr. Deming has taught us about, it just makes such a great difference in all of our lives. What it is about Deming's approach to management, in my experience, is that it brings together all the foundational pieces that you need to really find success. If you just go after, for example, cost cutting without understanding how it's going to affect people, the psychology, the intent systems, you just get yourself in trouble. But when you bring all of the system of profound knowledge in one place, and you're looking at how do I improve the process? How do I take into account variation? How do I take into account the psychology? It allows us to be successful in ways that I haven't seen with others.
Ask yourself the following questions. What did Deming mean by the transformation? Are leaders actively learning how to accomplish the transformation to the new philosophy of management? Do departments cooperate for the good of the organization, or are they encouraged to pursue their own goals? Are we learning ways to communicate across departments using operational definitions and plan, do, study, act methods? Are we designing our culture to find problems and solve them so we can tackle bigger challenges faster? Are we actively engaging everybody to create the critical mass needed for the transformation to the Deming approach?